Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our game day edition of the show for the Rose Bowl and college football semifinal game. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Our guest today is a fan favorite and has always been right up front with his thoughts on every game and is on Monday's showdown with Alabama. Chris Balas will join us in just a few minutes. We'll also hear a few comments from Jim Harbaugh. First, my view from Section 17 to get us going. As always with big games, I'm ready to tee it up and get the show on the road right now. We have to wait another few days though, so the anticipation will continue to grow. We are favored in this game, but not by much. There is very little room for error in this game for really either team. We will have to play our best game of the year. There is no doubt about that. I do have concerns. Alabama is loaded with NFL talent, and they're playing their best ball. They present some matchup challenges that are going to have to be schemed around, as Chris and I discussed in just a few minutes. Our offensive line against Bama's defensive line, that could be a problem. We really have not blown people off the ball all year, and while Bama does give up some yards on the inside, it's not much. The rush ends are both elite, and we've had trouble all year at the tackle spots in pass pro. The other matchup problem is our receivers against their secondary. They have three corners considered to be top 15 first-round picks in the future. They can cover big time. We'll have to scheme some ways to get our receivers some room, especially since they will probably double up on both tight ends. So I know there are always things to worry about when you are playing a team that is as talented as Alabama. At the end of the day, we need our best performance on both sides of the ball, and JJ will probably be asked to do a lot more with his legs. Now, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm really not. I think we can win this game, but it is going to take everything we've got and probably more. As Chris Balas says, if you want to be the best, you have to beat the best. It is going to be fun and nerve-wracking. At one of his few pressers in advance of the game, Jim sounded very relaxed. There is some background noise in these cuts because the team was at Disneyland when Jim addressed the media, but it's not that bad. The first question he was asked was how practice had been going.
It's been good. Guys have been really sharp, very energized. It's all been really good. Locked in, focused. I'm not sitting here today saying we've done everything and anything that we can. I want that feeling on game day that everybody's as confident as they can be and precise in what they're doing, and that's what we're doing. Is it's in a good place. We're just refining it, and looking at everything that we can, and we'll do that right up until game day.
Jim was asked if he thought the team was better prepared than they have been the last 2 years.
I think our team is very prepared. They have a one-track mind. Very, very focused on dominating each day, and then going to sleep at night, and waking up and taking on the next day and trying to dominate that. So that's been the mindset of this football team, and I think it puts them in puts them in a good place. And they are in a good place. We're going to keep taking that approach one day at a time. It's been paying off for us, and we'll stick with what got us here.
Angelique Shengelis asked Jim how he has been dealing with the constant NFL rumors, and he gave a very Jim Harbaugh answer.
It's such a one-track mind. That's the way we've gone about things. It's literally whatever day we're in, it's looking to get the most out of it, dominate the day. Then we're going to sleep tonight, wake up tomorrow, and see if we can't dominate that day. It's a single-minded group. It's very focused on just taking care of business today and see if we can't do the same tomorrow.
Jim said playing in the Rose Bowl and being in Pasadena on January 1st is what dreams are made of.
Maybe it's a Michigan thing. I think it's a Midwestern thing. You know, it's like growing up as a Midwestern kid, you got the snow outside. You haven't seen the sun for about maybe sometimes 30 or 45 days sometimes. And then to turn on that television set and see the Rose Bowl and the mountains and the sunshine and the palm trees. I'm sure that's why people moved here, you know, from in the 60s and 70s and 50s and 80s. They grew up like me, like watching this game and go, I really want to go there someday. And here we are. It's a great feeling. It's like, who's got it better than us?
My guest today says Alabama is not the juggernaut they have been in recent years, but they are still, by far, the best team we've played this year. With us next is Chris Balas from the Wolverine magazine and the Wolverine on 3. So stay with us. Joining us today as we get ready for that big January 1st college football playoff Rose Bowl game is Chris Balas from the Wolverine magazine and the Wolverine on 3. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and welcome back to the show, Chris.
And you, Mike. Thanks for having me, as always, brother.
Well, Chris, the team in California now. I know you're headed there today. Of course, final practices and game prep underway. It can't get here soon enough, can it?
No, it can't. And it's fun, the anticipation, and it's a lot better than it was before the last 3 years, right? When we were going out to what were essentially meaningless bowl games now. If you look at all the guys opting out, and I go back to the Peach Bowl when a lot of the Michigan kids opted out, and you're thinking, man, this isn't really indicative of this team. And they went out there and got hammered by an average Florida team, frankly. So this matters, and these are things that we don't take for granted anymore, right? After we went 17 years without a Big Ten title and had to cover teams that were abysmal by anybody's standards, not just Michigan's. So it's been fun to cover this team, and not just because they're so good, but because they're such great kids. And this is really one of the more down-to-earth, pleasant teams, group of kids that I've ever covered, starting with the quarterback, JJ McCarthy, Blake Corum, all those guys right down the line. It's been fantastic. So this is the way Michigan football is supposed to be, and it's nice to have it back, and hope it continues after this, and hope it continues for a couple more games here.
Well, we've heard the preparation for this year's game has been, somewhat different than the last 2 years. Less physical and trying to, as JJ said, avoid mental paralysis by overanalysis. So it sounds like Jim is just trying to keep the guys fresh and loose heading into Monday, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and heal up some bumps and bruises, some guys that people didn't know. Carson Barnhart, taking a lot of criticism this year at tackle. He's been playing through injury, and that's really kind of hindered him. And you can kind of tell, right? He was a little slower off the ball than maybe in past years. Last year's Ohio State game, for example, he was fantastic. This year he's been struggling to keep guys away from the quarterback, but he should be back and healthy. Guys with bumps and bruises. Junior Colson's going to need both of his hands, right? And he had casts on his hands, and especially against a guy like Jalen Milroe at quarterback for Alabama, getting him on the ground is going to be paramount, and those middle linebackers are going to be huge in that quest. So Mason Graham, with his hand, he'll be healthy now, and right down the line. So that's where it starts. As long as they're in great shape, and you know that Ben Herbert, the strength coach, is going to have those guys in great shape, and they aren't going to be fat and happy going into this game. They are motivated. They understand that this might be the last dance for this team, and maybe even their coach, right, who's still been rumored to have some NFL interest, and we believe that's true. And maybe this is the last time and no matter what, it's the last time this collection of talent will be together. But a lot of these guys might be moving on that had other years of eligibility as well. So they have one goal in mind, and that's to win it all. So, but a tough opponent, as you and I were talking about earlier. This Alabama team is peaking at the right time. I know that they struggled with Auburn, but to beat Georgia is a task, and there's a lot of talent on that football team.
Well, Chris, every Alabama media guy I've talked to in the last 2 weeks, including their radio voice, Eli Gold, thinks Jalen Milroe will be the difference in this game. As if Jesse Minter doesn't know that. We heard him talk about it at the presser last week. It is going to be fun to watch how Michigan defends him, though, isn't it, Chris?
Fun's one way to put it. He's kind of scary. And, everybody thinks because we praise Alabama and their talent that we're, oh, you're scared and so on and so forth. And, you're just being realistic here. If you look at a guy like that who's 6'3", 220 pounds and can put his foot in the ground like that, he's not Vince Young, okay? But I said that he runs like Vince Young when you watch him on film because he's big, he's strong. He's like a running back playing quarterback who can also throw the ball. And it's unlike anything Michigan has faced this year. And everybody's like, well, what about Talia Tagovailoa at Maryland or, whoever, the kid from UNLV? And I'm like, no. This is a different animal here. And he's got guys that are 6'7", 360 blocking in front of him. So, they're young, but they are talented up front. So this is a different animal than Michigan's faced all year. I asked Kenneth Grant, Michigan's defensive tackle, I said, are they like Ohio State? Because everybody wants to compare him to the best team he played, right? And he goes, no. He said they're much more physical. They're bigger. He said they're combo blocks. They're moving people off the ball. And when you got a quarterback like that back there that can do some things, it gets tougher. So it's going to be a team effort. The one thing I do trust is Jesse Minter, who, last year's game plan against TCU left a lot to be desired, but, that's the outlier. This guy is a brilliant defensive coordinator. So you have to hope that these guys are in good position and put Milroe and confuse him. First of all, you got to stop the run and stop him, but then you've got to confuse him when he's throwing the ball, which is something that Minter has done extremely well against quarterbacks. So I think Michigan certainly has a shot in this game, despite what your Alabama guys tend to say and their entire fan base.
Another thing the Bama media guys all mentioned to me was the difference in speed between the two teams, and you and I talked about this before we started taping. We have heard that for decades. In a bowl game, whenever we've met SEC teams that, wow, they're much faster. But this year, Michigan is projected to have somewhere in the range of 14 players going in the NFL draft. Maybe our NFL guys are slower than theirs. That's what I mentioned to them. I don't know. But do you think this speed thing is overblown?
It depends. Sometimes not. If you go back a few years to their receiving core and remember how fast they were, and Michigan was exposed in the secondary. I go back to USC, a 3-3 game at halftime when Michigan played in the Rose Bowl against USC, and then they turned their receivers loose. So it depends on the position. But one place that it was always that way, right, was in the trenches. And if you look at Georgia, you had a big defensive tackle chasing down Blake Corum a couple years ago, and you're thinking, holy cow. But now you look at Michigan and you look at Kenneth Grant, for example, on that defensive line, chasing down the Penn State backs and running a sub-5 40. And this is where I think Michigan matches up better now in the trenches. And so I think in terms of overall speed, maybe Alabama has more of it. But as far as team speed goes at the critical positions, it isn't as pronounced as it used to be. And I think that's why it's overblown this year. So, no, Michigan doesn't have the burners at receiver with the exception of Roman Wilson. If you look at that Alabama secondary, they can play with anybody. They've got 3 all-SEC guys there and a couple of top 15 picks probably in that secondary. So, they're good. But guess what? Michigan's good too, and Michigan's been playing great team football. And I think as a couple of your guys told you, Michigan's been elite at developing that talent.
Mm-hmm.
You look at guys like Josh Wallace. If you look at guys like Rod Moore, it doesn't take elite speed to win football games all the time. And I think Michigan has proven that with their guys that are fast enough just play great football.
Well, Chris, last week, Bruce Feldman from The Athletic and Fox Sports did a two-piece series, not sure if you saw that, interviewed Big Ten coaches, analysts, coordinators, then did the same with the SEC teams. So both conferences, not one of them thought Michigan could beat Alabama. Does that surprise you in any way?
A little. This is a good Michigan football team, and I saw a couple of their writers when they broke down the Michigan film saying, okay, this is a good football team, better than we thought they were. And I think a lot of it is based on what's happened in the past, right? And if you look at, okay, well, the SEC's best can't possibly lose to the Big Ten. And, granted, the SEC's been the strongest conference in the country for how many years, right? And as Jesse Minter said, this has been the Alabama Invitational. They've been to 8 of the 10 playoffs, and they generally get to the finals. Nick Saban, I think, lost in his first game and has won 6 straight semifinals since. And so when you give him a month to prepare, he's an elite coach and he's got elite talent. So it does surprise me a little bit. It doesn't surprise me from the Big Ten because these guys are all, they've got that chip because Michigan's been dominating for 3 years, and then we had sign date and all that crap that they were all clinging to. And now that narrative has been busted, and let's be very clear, it's been busted because you had 3 wins here, 2 of them top 10 wins with a coach, an assistant coach as an interim, and dominated at Penn State. You came back and beat Ohio State with Sharon Moore. You can't blame it on anything else but Michigan being better. So I think that doesn't surprise me in the Big Ten. With the SEC, it doesn't surprise me because they've got that arrogance and they think they're better. So, but you would never know that Michigan was favored in this game by listening to that and listening to a lot of the national pundits as well. And it wouldn't surprise me, though, if the late money came in on Alabama, too, because of it. I know 90% of the money was coming in on Alabama at one point in Vegas, and Michigan's still a 1-point favorite. So we'll see, but I expect a good game out there anyway, Mike. I think Michigan's going to play its best game, and I think JJ McCarthy has a chance to be the difference in this one.
Well, a few moments ago, we talked about the impact of Jalen Milroe. It seems like the media is really focused on what he brings to the game. When I read and hear that stuff, I always say, hey, we've got a pretty good quarterback too, JJ McCarthy. This is a big moment for him, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's time to turn him loose. And I don't mean throwing the football, right? Because it could be one of those games where the tackles struggle to pass protect. And if that's the case, you can't just put him back there and have him running for his life. But I think there are things that they can do with his legs that they haven't done yet. And it's going to take a great scheme to beat this Alabama team. They've got a lot of talent on defense. Everybody says, well, the interior of their line, Michigan should be able to run on them. And I think, well, Michigan hasn't been able to run on worse teams this year, and they've got a safety now that they can bring into the box if they trust those corners, like other teams have against Michigan's receivers. But so you're going to have to scheme some things up like they have for Ohio State the last several years. To me, it's you have to have your best game plan in this game, and that's something that they haven't done in some of these past bowl games. And we've seen it so many times against Ohio State now that it's time to break tendency, whether it's in the running game, whether you're doing some different things in the passing game that you haven't put on film. You got to get off to a good start here. You don't want to be playing from behind against these guys. So, but I do think McCarthy is going to be the big part of that. He's going to have to hit some shots downfield, and that offensive line is going to have to protect better. So they got to find a way, and part of that's going to be scheming things up, but we've seen them do it before, Mike. I think they can do it again.
Well, if I have concerns, and this is one that I worry about, it's the offensive line. We talked about this also before we started taping. We know Zinter's gone. It's a reshuffled offensive line, and there have been some injuries guys have been playing with late in the season, but this offensive line really has to play their best game, don't they, Chris?
They do, and they have to play better than they've been playing, and they changed their whole game plan against Penn State when they found out early they couldn't pass block. And fortunately, they ran 32 times in a row between from the second quarter on, and they were able to get out of there with a win. I don't know that you're going to be able to do that against this Alabama team. In fact, I would have guessed that you wouldn't be, because I think they're going to move the ball a little bit. Everybody's like, well, it's not like they were a juggernaut, and that's absolutely true offensively. But again, if you can't move the ball, then they are going to put up some points. So to me, it's about pass blocking. These guys have got to be better on their combo blocks, and they've got to get more movement up front. Something they haven't done extremely well in a lot of these games. So And again, part of that can be, scheme as well. When you go out and you give different looks in the running game, and maybe, it was funny. One of those Big Ten coaches you were talking about said Max Bredesen had a really good year for Michigan. He said, but we knew they were running the ball when he brought him into the game. Well, that's where you break tendency in games like this. Maybe instead of having him block, you send him out on a route. We know he can catch, and you do different things that they aren't expecting and catch them off guard. So again, it's going to be that kind of a game plan, I think, and then having their best game that's going to give Michigan a chance to win this one.
Well, on Tuesday you did a story, Chris, on Michigan's receivers and how they match up with Bama's really elite secondary. And I know Roman Wilson said in that story, we're just going to go right at them. But that still is an area that makes me nervous. That is going to be a real struggle to get open with those guys, isn't it?
It is. And, everybody, I remember going back to the Orange Bowl, Mike, you and I are veterans here. And when Alabama, it was very clear that Alabama had the athleticism advantage, right, against Tom Brady and crew. And they had to change their game plan early. And guess what they did? They went to Brady and David Terrell, and they carved him up. He had 100 and some yards and like 3 touchdowns, and that's how they won that football game. Does Michigan have a David Terrell on this team? They don't. And they are playing against the better secondary. So it's not like you can just say, okay, go win this, JJ, and, throw to your elite receiver. Now, they do have some elite tight ends, right? They've got a Colston Loveland who, okay, maybe that's a matchup that you exploit. But to me, that is a concern because, there's been really not a ton of respect for the Michigan receivers by anybody this year. A lot of teams have been lining right up on them one-on-one and right at the line of scrimmage and playing tight, daring them to get open, and a lot of times they don't. Roman Wilson's been one exception, and they put him in motion quite a bit to get him off the line of scrimmage. So I don't think they're going to scare them. I don't think there's any question about it, which, again, concerns me. Are they going to bring that safety in the box? And if you can't run the ball at all, then you're going to have a really hard time moving on this Alabama defense. So I think it's going to be about the tight ends. I think Colston Loveland's going to have a huge game. And again, JJ McCarthy with his arm and his feet. We've seen quarterbacks do some things with their feet against this Alabama defense. Peyton Thorne at Auburn did some things with some quarterback draws. We haven't seen a ton of those from JJ McCarthy, but we know that he's an outstanding athlete. We know that he can do that. This could be a game where you turn him loose and say, okay, go win this for us. And they finally have a quarterback that can do that.
Well, the matchup I do feel better about is Michigan's defense against Bama's offense. And I know Bama is very good. That O-line, they're huge. Jalen Milroe, run pass threat. That said, I still think the Michigan D is going to give them big problems, don't you?
I do, unless they line up and can move them and run the ball like nobody else has this year. Minnesota was one team that had some running success, and they changed things up. Scheme-wise, we're running some more zone and caught Michigan off guard a little bit before they adjusted. But when you've got 6'7", 360 coming at you on a combo block, it is hard to hold your ground, right? And when you've got a quarterback that is big and strong, too, getting those few extra yards, you can't give up 5, 6, 7 on first down, and that's what I'm going to be interested to see. I remember early on in that Georgia game, Mike, a couple of years ago when Georgia was picking up 7, 8 yards on first down just by running their base run plays, and I'm like, there's no way, right? So we're going to know early in this game if the Michigan defensive line is up to task, and they've got size mismatches. There's no question, with the exception of Kenneth Grant, with the exception of Mason Graham holds his ground against just about anybody, but you got Rayshawn Benny in there. Chris Jenkins has gotten much stronger. He's going to have the game of his life too, but he's being outweighed at times in there by 60 pounds. So, and when you get combo blocks on them, it's tough to hold your ground. So that's what's going to fascinate me. And if they can't run the ball and they have to throw, then I really trust Jesse Minter with his multiple looks on the back ends here to maybe force Milroe into some mistakes. So I don't think that Alabama is going to be going up and down the field on this Michigan defense. In my opinion, it's going to be tough for them. So I expect a lower scoring game, maybe in the 20s here, as compared to some of the huge numbers that other teams around the country have been putting up this year.
Yeah, and I get the feeling a lot of the SEC media, especially Bama guys I've talked to in the last 2 weeks, think this might not even be a close game. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that other than Penn State and Ohio State, they don't think Michigan's been challenged. At least they haven't seen it on tape. Do you think there could be some truth to that way of thinking?
Absolutely. And when Jesse Minter said that if you look at the offenses that we've faced and are the numbers inflated by the terrible offenses we've faced? Probably. And he's probably right. It is not the same level of competition there, especially in the Big Ten this year, as Alabama has faced. Let's be honest about it. So at the same time, this is a football team that has a lot of NFL talent, like you said, and has played a lot of football. So do I think it's going to be a blowout? Absolutely not. I think it'll be, it's not going to be like one of those games that Alabama takes control of early and dominates. This is not the gauntlet Alabama team of old here, right? This is not the team that Michigan played in, 2012 when they went down to Jerry World, and I predicted they were going to get blown out, and it didn't take long. And that's not going to happen in this game. Michigan's got too much pride. They've got too many athletes. But would it surprise me if Alabama won? Absolutely not. I think this is a team that, its ceiling is as high as anybody because of the talent that they've amassed and because of the recruiting rankings do matter, right? And if you've got, to me, it's about matchups as well. I don't like Michigan's offensive line against the Alabama edges, and I don't like the Michigan receivers against the Alabama secondary. So how's Michigan going to move the ball? It's not like they've been blowing people off the ball and running the ball like crazy. And if they had been, I'd feel better about it. So, again, that's why it comes down to a guy like McCarthy. And he's going to have to do some things. I think he's going to have to improvise as well at times and to make some things happen. So we'll see. But do I give the advantage to Alabama? I would, even as a Michigan writer. But I do think that certainly Michigan there's a path to Michigan winning this football game.
Well, Chris, I saved this for one of the last questions, but we're going to keep hearing about Jim's contract negotiations. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if anything's happening or not. A lot of the media is still focused on that. So are you surprised that it wasn't wrapped up before Monday's game? And what does that mean?
Yeah, not really. I think Jim wants to keep his options open, and he's been very clear about that. And everybody that we've talked to close to him or his circle has said that Jim's got that Super Bowl itch. And I think he's told players that too. If there's really a situation that suits him to a T, that it's something that he might have to explore because, when you come that close to the Lombardi Trophy and you lose it to your brother and your brother's got it and you don't, you want to win one. In fact, some people said he wants to win two to John's one because they're so competitive as much as they love each other. And so, and he is one of the best coaches in football. He's done it at every level, and he was again that close. So, and he said as much 2 years ago, as we reported, he was as good as gone to Minnesota. The interview didn't go as planned, so he's still here. Last year, he flirted with the Denver Broncos, and that turned out to not be a great situation. So that didn't happen, but a lot of people close to Michigan do believe that he's going to have more opportunities this year. We'll see if that comes to fruition because you never know in the NFL. We thought the Raiders were going to be a spot, and now their interim coach is performing very well. Will that spot be open? Probably not. The Chargers are notoriously cheap, and that's something that if they are interested in Harbaugh, if they offer him a contract worth half as much, is Jim going to go out there just for the sake of going out to the NFL and take a $6 million a year pay cut? As much as money doesn't matter to him, that's an awful lot of money. So we'll see. But I do think that he wants to explore his options. That's one of the reasons that he has an agent this year, Don Yee, that is actually Tom Brady's agent as well, and represents a lot of people in the NFL. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But I think who's going to see what some of the openings present on Black Monday and see if he could, if anybody has interest. But it's very clear that the higher ups at Michigan, especially in the administration, have made it clear to him. He had breakfast with Santa Ono, the president, last week, that they are very interested in keeping him, obviously, and intent on keeping him here. It's really up to him, though, if the ball is in his court, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens. It's probably going to go into January again, Mike.
Yeah. Well, final question before we let you get away, Chris. So many Michigan players came back just for this opportunity. Now it's here. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about Michigan's chances to actually win this game?
Yeah, I've met a 4. I've got Alabama winning a 27-20 game. And again, I think that Michigan will be competitive here, and I think they're going to play a good football game. It's past time that they played a great game in this bowl game, but this is why they came back. And there's no question that they are focused here. I think it's going to be a great football game that comes down to the fourth quarter. But I do think that Alabama has key matchup advantages at a couple of positions here that's going to make it tough for Michigan.
Well, we are going to find out Monday night. I think it's going to be a great game too, but it will have to be Michigan's best effort, so let's see. Joining us today has been Chris Balas from the Wolverine magazine and the Wolverine on 3. So, Chris, I know you're headed out there tonight for the game, so enjoy the time in Pasadena, and I hope you have a big smile on your face come Monday evening.
Me too, and that we're making plans for Houston, Mike. Thanks for having me, brother.
On Quick Hits today, as we mentioned earlier this week, we have a few players dinged up, but all things considered, we are in good shape for Monday's game. So there isn't much more we can say about this game that hasn't already been said in the last 3 weeks. On Monday afternoon, we'll find out if Michigan can rise to the occasion and bring down Nick Saban and his vaunted Crimson Tide. I think it's going to be a close game and a nerve-wracking one to watch, and I can't wait. Next week, I hope we have another 2 shows to bring you. If so, that would mean we're headed to Houston and the national championship game. Whatever happens, we'll be back next week. As we end another year, our 14th doing this show, my little labor of love, I'd like to say thank you for joining me each week and for all of the feedback you offer. You are a great audience. I would also like to wish each and every one of you a very happy Maize and Blue New Year. Enjoy the game on Monday. The last 3 years have been glorious, and we don't know what the future holds for Michigan football on so many fronts. Moments like these are what we have wished for so many times in recent decades, and they don't come around that often. So think victory, beat Alabama, and savor the entire day. That does it for now. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue.